Part 2 of Michael Jackson's The King of Pop. Rolling Stone reporter Michael Gilmore called the performance extraordinary. Jackson's performance drew comparisons to Elvis Presley and the Beatles' appearances on The Ed Sullivan Show. At the 26th Annual Grammy Awards, Thriller won 8 awards, and Jackson won an award for the E.T., the Extraterrestrial Storybook. Winning 8 Grammys in one ceremony is a record he holds with the band Santana. Jackson and Quincy Jones won the award for Producer of the Year. Thriller won Album of the Year, and the single won Best Pop Male Vocal Performance Award for Jackson. Beat It won Record of the Year and Best Male Rock Vocal Performance. Thriller won the Grammy for Best Engineered Recording at the 11th Annual American Music Awards. Jackson won another 8 awards and became the youngest artist to win the Award of Merit. Thriller's sales doubled after that release of an extended music video, Michael Jackson's Thriller, which sees Jackson dancing with a horde of zombies. The success transformed Jackson into a dominant force in global pop culture and cemented his status as the king of pop. Jackson had the highest royalty rate in the music industry at that point, with that about 2 of every album sold, and was making record-breaking profits. Dolls modeled after Jackson's appearance in stores in May 1984 for $12 each. In the same year, The Making of Michael Jackson's Thriller, a documentary about the music video, won a Grammy for Best Music Video. On May 14, 1984, President Ronald Reagan gave Jackson an award recognizing his support of alcohol and drug abuse charities, and in recognition of his support for the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's Drunk Driving Prevention Campaign, Jackson allowed the campaign to use Beat It for its public service announcement. In November 1983, Jackson and his brothers partnered with Pepsi in a $5 million promotional deal that broke records for a celebrity endorsement. On January 27, 1984, Michael and other members of the Jacksons filmed a Pepsi commercial overseen by Phil Dusenberry, a BBDO ad agency executive, and Alan Potash, Pepsi's worldwide creative director, at the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. During a simulated concert before a full house of fans, pyrotechnics accidentally set Jackson's hair on fire, causing second-degree burns to his scalp. Jackson underwent treatment to hide the scars and had his third rhinoplasty shortly thereafter. Pepsi settled out of court, and Jackson donated the $1.5 million settlement to the Brotman Medical Center in Culver City, California. Its now closed Michael Jackson's Burn Center was named in his honor. Jackson signed a second agreement with Pepsi in the late 1980s for $10 million. The second campaign covered 20 countries and provided financial support for Jackson's Bad Album and 1987 to 88 World Tour. Jackson had endorsements and advertising deals with other companies such as LA Gear, Suzuki, and Sony, but none were as significant as his deals with Pepsi. The Victory Tour of 1984 headlined the Jacksons and showcased Jackson's new solo material to more than 2 million Americans. It was the last tour he did with his brothers. Following controversy over the concert's ticket sales, Jackson donated his share of the proceeds at an estimate of $3 to $5 million to charity. During the last concert of the Victory Tour at the Dodger Stadium in Los Angeles, Jackson announced his split from the Jacksons during Shake Your Body. His charitable work continued with the release of We Are the World in 1985, co-written with Lionel Richie, which raised money for the poor in the U.S. and Africa. It earned $63 million and became one of the best-selling singles of all time, with 20 million copies sold. It won 4 Grammy Awards in 1985, including Song of the Year for Jackson and Richie as its writers. The project's creators received 2 special American Music Awards honors, one for the creation of the song and another for the USA for Africa Ideal. Jackson Jones and promoter Ken Cragen received special awards for their roles in the song's creation. Jackson collaborated with Paul McCartney in the early 1980s and learned that McCartney was making $40 million a year from owning the rights to other artists' songs. By 1983, Jackson had begun buying publishing rights to other songs, but he was careful with his acquisitions, only bidding on a few of the dozen that were offered to him. In 1984, Robert Holmes à Court announced he was selling the ATV Music publishing catalog, compromising the publishing rights to nearly 4,000 songs, including most of the Beatles' material. In 1981, McCartney had been offered the catalog for $20 million. Jackson submitted a bid of $46 million on November 20th, 1984. When Jackson and McCartney were unable to make a joint purchase, McCartney did not want to be the sole owner of the Beatles songs and did not pursue an offer on his own. Jackson's agents were unable to come to a deal in May 1985, after having spent more than $1 million in 4 months of due diligence work on the negotiations. In June 1985, Jackson and Branca learned that the entertainment company had made a tentative offer to buy ATV Music for $50 million. In early August, Holmes à Court contacted Jackson and talks resumed. Jackson's increased bid of $47.5 million was accepted because he could close the deal more quickly, having already completed due diligence. Jackson agreed to visit Holmes à Court in Australia, where he would appear on the Channel 7 Perth telethon. His purchase of ATV Music was finalized on August 10, 1985. Increased tabloids speculation had begun cause Jackson's skin had been medium brown during his youth, but from the mid-1980s gradually grew paler. The change drew widespread media coverage, including speculations that he had been bleaching his skin. His dermatologist Arnold Klin said he observed in 1983 that Jackson had vitiligo, a condition characterized by patches of the skin losing their pigment and sensitivity to sunlight. He also identified discoid lupus erythematosus in Jackson. He diagnosed Jackson with lupus that year and with vitiligo in 1986. Vitiligo's drastic effects on the body can cause psychological distress. Jackson used fair-colored makeup and possibly skin-bleaching prescription creams to cover up the uneven blotches of color caused by the illness. The creams would have further lightened his skin, and with the application of makeup, he would appear very pale. Jackson said he had not purposely bleached his skin and could not control his vitiligo, adding, "When people make up stories that I don't want to be who I am, it hurts me." He became friends with Klein and Klein's assistant Debbie Rowe. Rowe later became Jackson's second wife and the mother of his first 2 children. In his 1988 autobiography and a 1993 interview, Jackson said he had 2 rhinoplasty surgeries and a cleft chin surgery, but no more than that. He said he lost weight in the early 1980s because of a change in diet to achieve a dancer's body. Witnesses reported that he was often dizzy and speculated he was suffering from anorexia nervosa. Periods of weight loss became a recurring problem later in his life. After his death, Jackson's mother said that he first turned to cosmetic procedures to remedy his vitiligo because he did not want to look like a spotted cow. She said he had received more than the 2 cosmetic surgeries he claimed and speculated that he had become addicted to them. In 1986, tabloids reported that Jackson slept in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to slow aging and pictured him lying in a glass box. The claim was untrue, and tabloids reported that he spread the story himself. They also reported that Jackson took female hormone shots to keep his voice high and facial hair wispy, proposed to Elizabeth Taylor and possibly had a shrine of her, and had cosmetic surgery on his eyes. Jackson's manager Frank DiLio denied all of them, except for Jackson having a chamber. DiLio added, "I don't know if he sleeps in it, I'm not for it. But Michael thinks it's something that's probably healthy for him. He's a bit of a health fanatic." When Jackson took his pet chimpanzee, Bubbles, to tour in Japan, the media portrayed Jackson as an inspiring Disney cartoon character who befriended animals. Jackson worked with George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola on the 17-minute, 30 million 3D film Captain EO, which ran from 1986 at Disneyland and Epcot, and later at Tokyo Disneyland and Euro Disneyland. After having been removed in the late 1990s, it returned to the theme park for several years after Jackson's death. In 1987, Jackson disassociated himself from the Jehovah's Witnesses. Katherine Jackson said this might have been because some witness didn't agree with his video, The Thriller. Jackson's first album in 5 years, Bad, in 1987, was highly anticipated, with the industry expecting another major success. It became the first album to produce 5 U.S. #1 singles. Bad won the 1988 Grammy for Best Engineered Recording, Non-Classical, and the 1990 Grammy Award for Best Music Video for Leave Me Alone. Jackson also won an award of achievement at the American Music Award in 1989 after Bad generated 5 #1 singles. It became the very first album to top the charts in 25 countries and the best-selling album worldwide in 1987 and 1988. By 2012, it had sold between 30 and 45 million copies worldwide. The Bad World Tour ran from September 12, 1987 to January 14, 1989. In Japan, the tour had 14 sellouts and drew 570,000 people, nearly tripling the previous record for a single tour. The 504,000 people who attended 7 sold-out shows at Wembley Stadium set a new Guinness World Record. In 1988, Jackson released his autobiography, Moonwalk, with input from Stephen Davis and Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. It sold 200,000 copies and reached the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. Jackson discussed his childhood, the Jackson 5, and the abuse from his father. He attributed his changing facial appearance to 3 plastic surgeries, puberty, weight loss, a strict vegetarian diet, a change in hairstyle, and stage lighting. In June, Jackson was honored with the Vermeil Medal of the City of Paris by the then Mayor of Paris, Jacques Chirac, during his stay in the city as part of the Bad World Tour. In October, Jackson released a film, Moonwalker, which featured live footage and short films starring Jackson and Joe Pesci. In the US, it was released direct to video and became the best-selling video cassette in the country. The RIAA certified it as 8 times platinum in the US. In March 1988, Jackson purchased 2,700 acres of land near Santa Ynez, California, to build a new home, Neverland Ranch, at a cost of $17 million, equivalent to $28,950,760 in 2021. Jackson became known as the King of Pop, a nickname that Jackson's publicist embraced. When Elizabeth Taylor presented him with the Soul Train Heritage Award in 1989, she called him the true King of Pop, Rock, and Soul. President George H.W. Bush designated him the White House's Artist of the Decade from 1985 to 1990. His rendition of You Were There at Sammy Davis Jr.'s 60th birthday celebration won Jackson a second Emmy nomination. Jackson was the best-selling artist of the 1980s. In March 1991, Jackson renewed his contract with Sony for $65 million, a record-breaking deal, beating Neil Diamond's renewal contract with Columbia Records. In 1991, he released his 8th album, Dangerous, co-produced with Teddy Riley. It was certified 8 times platinum in the US and by 2018 had sold 32 million copies worldwide. In the US, the first single, Black or White, was the album's highest charting song. It was number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 7 weeks and achieved similar chart performances worldwide. The second album, Remember the Time, peaked at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart. At the end of 1992, Dangerous was the best-selling album of the year worldwide, and Black and White, the best-selling single of the year worldwide at the Billboard Music Awards. In 1993, he performed Remember the Time at the Soul Train Music Awards in a chair, saying he twisted his ankle during dance rehearsal in the UK, Heal the World, made number 2 on the charts in 1992. Jackson founded the Heal the World Foundation in 1992. The charity brought unprivileged children to Jackson's Ranch to use the theme park rides and sent millions of dollars around the globe to help children threatened by war, poverty, and disease. That July, Jackson published his second book, Dancing the Dream, a collection of poetry. The Dangerous World Tour ran between June 1992 and November 1993 and grossed $100 million. Jackson performed for 3.5 million people in 70 concerts, all of which were outside of the U.S. Part of the proceeds went to Heal the World Foundation. Jackson sold the broadcast rights of the tour to HBO for $20 million, a record-breaking deal that still stands. Please like and subscribe for part 3. All of this is research found on the internet.